The crops grow in the soil, but it is heaven that decides their fate. For example, how much sunshine God gives it, and whether it is exposed to the sun or haze. For example, how much water he gives it a flood or gives it a drought. For example, what temperature to give it, whether to give it a hot summer or a severe cold. These are the keys, directly related to the final harvest of the crops, and even to the life and death of the crops. More than that, if God doesn't save face, the crops will get sick. Let's say rice will get sheath blight. A good seedling will not be heading, and eventually it will become nothing and become grass. Crops will also grow worms. Those crazy, unreasonable worms treat the leaves or sap of the crops as their feast, and they rush ahead of you, eating all your grains and drinking them all. In the end, what you take back is just the shrift. These are the power of heaven. However, Chairman Mao spoke up that man is sure to conquer heaven. What is drought? What is a flood? What are few worms? Sweep away all pests, all invincible. The work of eradicating insects and diseases is entrusted to pesticides. Rice has sheath blight? Well, then let's have some plant cleaner, which is good medicine for the treatment of sheath blight. It can be said that matter arrives, disease leaves. Wheat seedlings have aphids. You can use 23 emulsion to deal with it. Cotton has a specific method. Sprinkle little dimethoate. If it really doesn't work, you can use Frondan. Of course, the most severe and effective pesticide is DDVP, which has an excellent broad spectrum. No matter what kind of crops you are, no matter what disease you are, no matter what kind of insect you are, as long as you are the enemy, DDVP is a name that all enemies are scared to hear. Definitely making you shitty and have no place to die. What Sanya is holding is DDVP. What she wants to eliminate is not the pest, but herself. Killing oneself with DDVP is the latest creation of country women or country girls who intend suicide. Compared with throwing into a river, compared with hanging, jumping into a well, hitting a wall, cutting a trachea, and wiping the neck, drinking pesticide is much more convenient and scientific. In a word, it saves a lot of trouble. It is a progress of the times. Sanya drank pesticide at noon, lunchtime. Kong Suzhen just put the bowls and chopsticks on the dining table. Da Gui sat down, and Hong Qi also sat down. Kong Suzhen suddenly smelled a bad smell. Her nostrils were inhaled twice. It was the pesticide. The smell of the pesticide is so sneaky, like flying snakes, sticking out their tongues all over the house. Kong Suzhen put down the spoon. Her heart suddenly became gloomy, and when she looked around, Sanya's door was closed. Kong Suzhen shouted, "Ya!" Kong Suzhen immediately added, "Ya!" She crept up, pushed, and was stunned. Sanya was standing by the bed with a bottle in her hand. Sanya looked at the skeleton on the bottle, as if nothing happened. The skeleton has no eyes, no nose, and no mouth, but only some black and deep holes, a total of 5. And every pair of teeth in the mouth is very symmetrical, gnashing quietly. It seemed that Sanya had been looking at it for a while, and it was finally okay. She put the mouth of the bottle in her mouth and raised her neck. Kong Suzhen was still stunned. She didn't even have time to shout, but she had already pounced. Kong Suzhen opened the medicine bottle in Sanya's hand. The medicine bottle fell to the ground and shattered. The explosion of the medicine bottle was far less terrifying than expected, and it was even a little dull. It was just that the debris that flew into the distance was melodious. and the smell of pesticide was insane. The flying snakes instantly grew thicker and longer. Thousands of them were sticky and filled the house. Kung Su-jin slapped her butt and jumped to an unbelievable height before she shouted, "Flesh, flesh, my flesh!" Wang Dagui carried Sanya on his back and ran to the CMS. His hurried footsteps were almost like that of an enthusiastic propagandist, running and shouting all the way. In a blink, Wang Village became noisy. Wang Village was originally quiet, and Wang Village was originally silent. It seemed that he had been waiting for the event and was always preparing for the occurrence of the event. Well, now the event has finally come, and the silence is suddenly broken, and it is shocking. The news is the order, the time to take a breath, and all the people are rushing out of the house. They are running. Many were chewing, and many were still holding bowls and chopsticks in their hands. They rushed to Kung Su-jin's patio, and of course got nothing. With their rich experience and unparalleled judgment on the development of the situation, they charged directly to the CMS. Between Kung Su-jin's home and the CMS, chickens fly and dogs jump all the way. Wang Village was boiling. People were blocking their door and windows of the CMS, trying their best to seize the most favorable terrain, to seize the best visual angle or Acmeni height. Some people even climbed the trees. The last person to appear was undoubtedly the most crucial, Xinglong. People were making way for him. Xinglong rolled up his cuffs as he walked. By the time he entered the door, his cuffs were almost rolled up. The hug of the CMS was full of people, and it was almost impossible to turn around. Xinglong said, "Take her outside." The farmers were all enthusiastic people, and everyone was rubbing her. They were all hands and feet, and together took Sanya outside and put her on the ground. Now only Xinglong was left in the house. He repeatedly rubbed his hands in the water with soap, and he wanted to prepare a large basin full of soapy water for Sanya's stomach lavage. In the end, the soapy water was ready, and Xinglong squatted in front of Sanya with the basin. Sanya closed her eyes tightly, gritted her teeth, and didn't let go. From Sanya's determined appearance, everyone thought that Xinglong was going to use chopsticks to pry Sanya's teeth. But no, Xinglong had Xinglong's way. He had studied in the county. Xinglong asked people to hold Sanya's head, left leg, left arm, and right arm, and Sanya couldn't move at all. At this time, Xinglong squeezed Sanya's neck tightly, preventing Sanya from breathing. Then, as soon as she let go, Sanya's mouth suddenly opened wide. Xinglong picked up the prepared branch and tucked it between Sanya's teeth accurately, so that her teeth would no longer be able to bite, and her mouth could certainly not be closed tightly. Xinglong didn't pour in immediately, but squeezed Sanya's nose. This is very important. As long as Sanya's nose is squeezed tightly, her breathing can only rely on her mouth. To breathe, she had to swallow the soapy water in her mouth as much as she could, until full. Xinglong methodically poured down half of the basin in a minute. There was silence all around, and people admired Xinglong's craftsmanship in their hearts and praised Xinglong's calmness in saving a life. Sanya was full, and the exciting moment finally came. Sanya could no longer lie on the ground and pretend to be dead. Her stomach was filled with soapy water, which was absolutely disgusting. Although she still closed her eyes, she sat up and started to vomit as soon as she straightened up. It sounded like her internal organs were full of water, gushing out loudly. The dark crowd took a step back and breathed a sigh of relief. Xinglong raised his fingers to pick up a piece of vomit on the ground and stretch it out in front of Kung Su-jin to let Kung Su-jin smell it. This was very important. He was seeing if there were lots of pesticides in the stomach and if the smell was strong so the next step could be determined. Kong Su-zhen didn't smell it, but stuck out her tongue, licked a piece, and put the vomit in her mouth. At this time, how could Kong Su-zhen dare to believe her nose? Her daughter's life was all here. She was only willing to believe her tongue. But Kong Su-zhen tasted nothing and spit it herself. Kong Su-zhen tasted again, and this time it was conclusive, but she was even more afraid. There was no smell of pesticides, not at all. It stood to reason that her heart should be full of surprises. But Kong Su-zhen didn't. She stared blankly at Xinglong, not knowing why. Can only let her man Wang Dagui continue to taste. When Duanfang came to the CMS, the gate was already full of people. Almost all the people in the village were there. Shen Cuizhen was an exception. She came, but she didn't squeeze into the crowd, but kept standing at the outermost intersection. She had her mind that she was waiting for Duanfang. As soon as Duanfang appeared, she had to drag him away immediately. At this time, Duanfang should not appear in such a place, as the place with issues should not stay. What Kong Su-zhen was most worried about still happened. Duanfang, here he is. Shen Cuizhen didn't say anything, just grabbed him. However, Duanfang's face was already dark, and he was extremely angry. How could he be held? Duanfang squeezed directly into the gap and brought his mother in as well. Duanfang's arrival hardly attracted anyone's attention. However, his strength was so great that completely pushed open a path, very arrogantly relying on the strength of his arms. There was a commotion in the crowd, and Duanfang came. Duanfang came eventually. The news spread at the fastest speed in the chaotic and noisy crowd, and the dark crowd suddenly quieted down. Such quietness has its subtext, which shows that everyone on the scene has long been aware of Duanfang and Sanya's affairs. People have every reason to keep their mouths shut and wait and see where things go. Scorching sun. Crowds of people. Duanfang came to the center of the crowd and squatted down beside Sanya. Fortunately, Sanya was still alive. Duanfang's heart was immediately relieved. Duanfang put a hand on Xinglong's shoulder and asked, "Is there any help?" Xinglong put his mouth all the way to Duanfang's ear and whispered, "It was discovered early. Maybe the pesticide hasn't been eaten yet." This news for Duanfang was a desperate situation, and it had a touching power that was enough to knock Duanfang down. Duanfang pursed his lips tightly, nodded, and kept nodding. Duanfang patted Xinglong's shoulder twice, freeing his hand and put it on Sanya's forehead. This move is appalling. This move means that all the secrets of him and Sanya have been made public, and the entire Wang village is watching. Duanfang called out softly, "Sanya." Sanya closed her eyes and wanted to open them, but the sun in the sky was so toxic that Sanya couldn't open them. But she heard it all. It was Duanfang. She stretched out her hand in the air, softly, trying to grab something. Duanfang grabbed it. That was to say, Sanya grabbed it. Soft, yet firmly grasped. Sanya's 5 fingers, her arms, and her whole body contracted, and she pulled Duanfang's hand up to her chest, pulling it all the way to her, pressing it against her chest. Sanya's actions are shocking and can be said to be crazy. 4 or 5 years after Sanya's death, young people in Wang village can remember Sanya's original actions when they are in love. This is a classic action, an unforgettable action, an ominous action, and a precursor to death. On the day of Sanya's death, one village's comrades commented on Sanya as follows. This girl is a coquettish girl, and she didn't forget to give the man a bowl of tofu when she was about to die. Although Kong Suzhen was crazy, Duanfang's every move was still in her eyes. It should be said that at such a moment, Duanfang is affectionate and righteous. Just because of his current appearance, Kong Suzhen forgave him. This kid can be hated. As soon as she looked up, her eyes met Shen Cuizhen. The eyes of the two mothers never let go at this moment. They just looked at it for a while and couldn't say anything anymore. Duanfang picked up Sanya from the ground, and he wanted to carry Sanya into the CMS. Duanfang went crazy, kicking while walking. At this time, if anyone blocks Duanfang's way, it will be fatal. Duanfang only put Xinglong, Dagui, and Kong Suzhen in, while others were blocked outside. Hongqi also wanted to come in and join in the fun, but was stopped by Duanfang. Hongqi said loudly, "It's my sister, what's your business?" Duanfang thought about it, but he still let him in. Duanfang picked up a pair of scissors, stuffed it in Hongqi's hand, and said, "Poke whoever comes in." Hongqi stood at the door and turned around. For the first time, he felt above everyone else. Yes, he clearly has a backer like Duanfang, and he's proud of himself. Hongqi's appearance suddenly became very fierce, roaring. He raised his hips and had the imposing manner of a man blocking everyone. At the time of Kong Suzhen grabbing Sanya, Duanfang and Xinglong were in urgent consultation. Whether to send Sanya to the town or not was the primary question in front of them. There was no smell in Sanya's vomit. The pupils had never been dilated. Although the breathing was rapid, there was no sign of weakness. Maybe it was just a false alarm. They were all on the good side. However, no one could predict the bad side, and no one knew what the next step would be. Life is at stake, and you can't afford to gamble. As a precaution, Xinglong still preemptively injected Sanya with atropine, and then hung up the infusion bottle and opened the bowl from left to right. A bottle of normal saline and a bottle of glucose. In any case, such measures are essential. Even if she was sent to the town hospital, at least he bought time. After all, it is more than 10 li of waterway. When the thing has reached such a situation, it is actually simple to say it, as long as Sanya speaks. Whether she drank or not, she could answer in one sentence, even if she nodded or shook her head. The following things would be easy to handle. However, no matter how Kong Suzhen asked or begged, Sanya didn't open her mouth. She closed her eyes tightly, like a dead pig not afraid of being scalded by boiling water. Kong Suzhen almost knelt down to her daughter. "Who are you being stubborn with, my little ancestor?" Sanya didn't drink, not even a drop. She doesn't drink. It's actually easy to die. What day can she die? As long as the day when Fang Chengfu really came to bring her, and she was sure that Duanfang absolutely didn't love her, it would not be too late to die. Even if she can't drink pesticides, she can still hang herself. Even if she can't hang herself, she can jump into a river. And even if she can't jump into a river, she can still hit a wall. You can watch her. You can hide all the hanging ropes in the road, and you can cover all the rivers on the earth. You don't have the patience. Sanya drinking the pesticide this time was fake. If she really wanted to die, it would not be Kong Suzhen's turn to rush in, or Xinglong's turn to pour soapy water here. She did it for others to see, and most importantly, she wanted to show it to Duanfang. She wanted Duanfang to see her heart. She wanted to see what Duanfang would do when she was about to die. She also wanted to show her mother, if you want me to marry, I will die. No discussion. But Duanfang came, in front of everyone, and without fear, he came. This made Sanya heartbroken. It seemed that Sanya was really in his heart. Even if she was really dead, it's worth it. Sanya's sorrow was sweet, and Sanya's desolation was hot. She just wanted to say, Duanfang, marry me, huh? You marry my humble little life, huh? But Sanya wouldn't speak. She wouldn't say anything. Whatever it was, she could do it, but she couldn't say it. Kong Suzhen was already crazy. She grabbed Sanya's hand tightly and howled shamelessly, Sanya, tell me, did you drink? Sanya closed her eyes but didn't speak. She couldn't speak. If she told the truth, she would be fake dead. Fake death is too embarrassing. All the people in one village come to see you die, tears already, but you don't die. Who are you worthy of? You show yourself and you will leave a message for others for a lifetime. There is one thing Sanya knows. 4 or 5 years ago, Gao Hongying in Gao village lost her life like this. Gao Hongying fell in love with a Navy soldier but was dumped by him. She wanted to force him by drinking the pesticide. Unable to hold back the doctor's enema, Gao Hongying confessed, I didn't dare to swallow it. Gao Hongying's head had never been raised since then. For example, when someone in the village wanted to make shoes and needed examples of shoes, a cunning woman would say, go to Hongying, she can make an example. Which girl can bear this? Gao Hongying jumped into the well eventually. It wasn't until Gao Hongying's body was stuck in the well that the mouths in Gao village let go of her and buried Hongying with majestic tears and flying snot. The negotiation time was very short, and the result came out. Duanfang said, send her to Zhongbao town. Duanfang said decisively, send her now. Sanya lay flat on the bench and heard Duanfang's decision clearly. Tears fell from the corners of her eyes. Until this time, Sanya's tears flowed down. Sanya couldn't speak. She wanted to go to the town in her heart. Whether it is real death or fake death, once she's sent to the town, nature is completely different. And Sanya is the one who is rescued by the doctor. This time, she would no longer be afraid of gossip from others. Besides, just for the cobbler fun, if you want to marry, well, you can marry a corpse back home. As soon as he was frightened, maybe he would unmarry her. Sanya thought that Duanfang knew what she was thinking. He was paving the way for Sanya to come down. Sanya felt that she couldn't live without Duanfang for her whole life, and it hurt more and more. Duanfang ordered Hongqi to bring the big skull, and he carried Sanya on his back, caught Xinglong, and hurriedly boarded the boat. Wang Dagui was worried and wanted to step onto the boat, but Kong Suzhen held him back. Although she was panicked, Kong Suzhen was an understanding woman after all. She saw a few hints and was less worried. It seemed that she was in a hurry and became foolish, and she was asking her daughter loudly, how could she open her mouth? Of course, she had to be sent to Zhongbao town. Cui Zhen, how were you cultivated in your previous life? You have such a son. Your husband died, but got such a son. This is the Buddha's pity for you. Cui Zhen. Don't blame me for being shameless. I'll go to you someday. I'll kneel down to you, and I'll kowtow to you. Life is a lifetime. Grass and trees are in a fall. Let them be. You have mercy and leave them alone, huh? It was only after Xinglong got on a boat that he remembered saline and glucose, and they are needed along the way. Hongqi was very active and said, I'll go. Xinglong then let him go. Hongqi was clumsy, wrapped saline and glucose in his shirt, and stumbled back to the boat. Talking about it in detail, both saline and glucose are not drugs. They are useless. However, for people who are poisoned, it means a lot. After all, it is a waterway of about 10 li. Another point is that, as a barefoot doctor, Xinglong understands the most basic truth. When a situation is serious, hanging an infusion bottle for a patient is an extremely important comfort for the patient and the people around her. In this sense, hanging and not hanging are completely different. The infusion bottle hanging there gives people the impression of size, safety, formality, sustenance, prospect, and the impression of saving lives and casualties. Duanfang and Xinglong were swaying the sculls desperately. Hongqi was crooked in the cabin, looking up at the hanging bottle. The hanging bottle is interesting. There are bubbles, a string of them, like the breath of a fish. If such bubbles appear in the pond, there must be fish below, which is carp. Hongqi is certain, and it looks like 2 or 3 pounds. According to Hongqi's experience, it is definitely not a silver carp. The silver carp has a big mouth and is impatient, and it is far less stable than the carp. Therefore, its bubbles are not like this. Hongqi had almost seen the carp and followed the bubbles to find it. His gaze passed through the bottleneck, the dropper, and finally landed on Sanya's arm. It wasn't a fish. Hongqi looked at Sanya's hand and suddenly remembered that he had never taken medicine or injections, let alone an infusion bottle. Having an infusion bottle is really an unattainable thing. He doesn't know what kind of blessing, and Hongqi has never enjoyed it. Is it sweet or sour? Is it spicy or salty? Hongqi was not sure at all. Hongqi was lying in the middle cabin, thinking of his messy thoughts, and slowly fell asleep under the big sun. To be honest, Xinglong didn't look at Sanya's face, but only because of Duanfang's affection. As a doctor, it's hard for him to talk surely. In fact, he was very sure. Sanya was all right. The smell of her vomit was there. If Sanya weren't acting like this, he must have gone to bed and fallen asleep by now. He could only count on this sleep at noon. He can't sleep for a minute at night. These days, his father's movements are getting louder and louder, and it's getting more and more frightening. Just finished hanging himself, he is healed of the wound on his head, but other movements come again. During the day, he's slumped and nothing happens. When the night comes, it's frightening, and his spirit comes to him. He takes a flashlight, lightens everywhere, looks everywhere, and mutters in his mouth. He lightens in the patio, lightens under the bed, lightens behind the door, lightens in the fence, opens the door of the stand, and lightens inside the stand. And in the second half of the night, it's even more frightening. Getting up again and again, along the beams on the roof, he lightens one by one. It's like the searchlights of the Japs in the movie. In the dead of night, those old wooden beams and rafters cannot be lightened. Once they are lightened, they have a special atmosphere. With signs of terror, even a brave man would be afraid. What is lightening? What is he looking for? He doesn't say it. Later, the situation was even worse. Not only lightning, but also he was holding a knife in his other hand. This time, it was murderous. Not a murderous old Haporn. No, there is something in the family that is murderous towards old Haporn, and he has to guard against it and protect himself. At this time, there is a thing in the house. This thing is murderous, hiding everywhere and wants to attack old Haporn. How is the day going? Just to say that last night it was fine, old Haporn showed his flashlight on Xinglong's face again. Thanks to Xinglong's quick eyes and quick hands, he grabbed old Haporn's flashlight and in turn illuminated old Haporn. Old Haporn was unexpectedly frightened, shivered, his hands softened, and the kitchen knife fell on the floor tile. In the middle of the night, suddenly the kitchen knife bumped into the ground 4 or 5 times. Do you think it is scary or not? Old Haporn's face became extremely hideous under the light of the flashlight, and it froze there, suspended in the air. The cheeks on both sides were also sunken. The wrinkles at the corners of the eyes were fully visible, almost like a devil who had just emerged from the cellar. And the light in the pupils had already split, blue and faint, emitting a fearful and fierce light. Because of fear and viciousness, they were shiny and bright. It was terrifying and pathetic. Old Haporn pursed his lower lip and asked Xinglong, "Who are you?" Xinglong took a step forward, stepped on the kitchen knife, turned the flashlight around, illuminated his face, and said, "Dad, I'm Xinglong, Xinglong." Old Haporn stared at his own son. His chin turned to the left for a while, and then to the right for a while, and recognized that it was Xinglong, his own son. Old Haporn grabbed Xinglong's arm and said, "Xinglong, someone is hiding in the house. There is someone in the house. Hurry up and grab him and chop him up." Old Haporn's words made Xinglong's hair stand on end, but he dared not mess it up, so he could only doubly calm and said, "How come is someone at home, huh? Not even a mouse." Old Haporn was anxious, very anxious. He bit it so tightly that shook his head. He told Xinglong vaguely but firmly, "Yes, there is someone at home." As a barefoot doctor, Xinglong had no idea what disease his father had. Really ashamed to say it. Say he's crazy, he's not. As soon as the day dawns, he's well and sits calmly in the corner, speaking and doing things in his own way, which shows that his brain is not broken. It's not right to say that he's not crazy. In the middle of the night, he just feels that there is someone in his home, hiding under the bed, hiding in boxes, hiding in the cracks in the walls, hiding on the roof beams, hiding in the baskets, hiding in the pots, bowls, shoes, even in his own ears and asshole. In short, it hides in all dark places that are difficult to be illuminated by the sun. Xinglong really can't do anything about it. You can't stop the sun from going down if you have great ability. The east must be red and the sun must rise. This is not something that only comes once every 3 or 5 years, and it is not something that only comes once every 10 or 8 years. It happens once a day, every year, every month, every day. No one can stop it. It really kills people. Old Haporn is not sick, if you want to say he is, which can only be night sickness. His illness is thus bound up with the night and becomes a part of the night, as clueless as the night, as boundless as the night, and as bottomless as the night. The sickness is deadly to old Haporn and to Xinglong as deadly as night. As long as it gets dark, the person at home becomes very huge, empty, vast, and at the same time very subtle and secretive. In a word, he is everywhere, pervasive like a shadow. But who is this person? Who is he? Old Haporn does not say. Xinglong asked countless times, but old Haporn didn't say anything. Xinglong firmly believes that as long as that person is known, the sky will dawn. Father's illness will be cured. For several times, Xinglong wanted to torture to extract a confession, and he made a tiger bunch. However, Xinglong held back. He dared not. He is still afraid of his father. How poisonous the old man's hands are! Xinglong and his brother have learned from them all the way. Xinglong has never seen anyone who is more ignorant than his father. Unless you kill him, if you can beat him to death, once he recovers his breath, he will definitely kill you. There is also a little bit of Xinglong not sure. Is it useful to use the tiger bench to deal with his father? Xinglong was not sure. Whoever knows the father has to be the son. Old Haporn, Xinglong knows, has a desperate temperament, majestic blood, and the more frustrated he is, the more courageous he is. You can get the answer. The more he is beaten, the more stubborn he becomes. The more painful, the more tight-lipped he becomes. If you don't get it right, you won't be able to end. What should he do? Day by day, no one in the family can deal with it. Xinglong is really sleepy. He just wants to lie flat in the cabin like Hongqi and have a good sleep. Even 5 minutes is good. Xinglong cannot, mainly because of shyness. He is saving a person after all. He, as a doctor, if sleeps next to the patient, is going to be hit by thunder. Then close my eyes, but dare not loosen my hands at all. Hongqi has woken up, and he has been looking at the hanging bottle on the mast for a long time. He is waiting. He's waiting for the saline in the bottle to be cleared so that he can change the infusion bottle with his own hands and live with the addiction of a barefoot doctor. Such opportunities are rare. Maybe only this time. Sanya's uneasy appeared after Hongqi replaced the infusion bottle. Xinglong didn't pay attention. Sanya suddenly moved. After moving a few times, it seems that she was too shy to disturb Duanfang and Xinglong, so she became stable again. Later, Sanya said softly, "Duanfang?" Duanfang didn't hear either. When Duanfang heard it, Sanya's expression was already quite painful. Her brows, eyes, and the corners of her mouth were deformed. The situation quickly turned worse, and Sanya's state changed. Duanfang suddenly found that Sanya's lips were black and purple, and her mouth was open and extremely wide. Duanfang cried out, "Xinglong, Xinglong!" But Sanya's belly began to stiffen. Her mouth was just so open, but she couldn't catch a breath. She could only stare desperately, wide and round. There seemed to be something in her mouth too. It was a sentence, something important. She wanted to say it, but couldn't. Duanfang jumped up and hugged Sanya at once, feeling that Sanya was making an effort, the last trace of strength. This force was all concentrated in Sanya's abdomen. She arched her back, pushed up, and went all out. She longed to withstand something, but her eyes seemed unbearable, and she was looking at Duanfang with signs of compromise and giving up. That was the last stare. Obviously, Sanya had done her best, and her body loosened a little, and then, all loosed at once, she finally landed on Duanfang's arm. The sun was like fire, but Sanya's body was cold, and the flame-like sunlight could not change this basic situation. Duanfang had been holding Sanya in his arms all the time. His eyes were crazy, and he didn't know where to look. His eyes finally stayed on the dropper, and along the dropper, Duanfang's eyes climbed up, all the way to the infusion bottle. Duanfang looked at the bottle, but suddenly put down Sanya and straightened up. He looked at the hanging bottle from the mast and looked closely. It was soda. Holding the infusion bottle, Duanfang began to gasp for a long time before he remembered to use his eyes to look for Xinglong. Unexpectedly, Xinglong was already staring at Duanfang, and Duanfang's eyes were red. Xinglong took a step back, his arms and chin hung down, and he was panting too. The boat stopped and floated in the middle of the river with a large scull hanging behind it, and the water was so quiet that there were no ripples. Hongqi looked at them. Duanfang stared at Xinglong, and Xinglong also stared at Duanfang, just gasping. Hongqi didn't know what happened, and Hongqi would never know. In the end, Duanfang made a move. He stretched out his arm, smashed the bottle, and threw it into the river. One, another, clanging, all thrown into the river. Xinglong's legs went soft, and he suddenly collapsed on the board.